At my brother's 20th birthday, my mother raised her glass. A toast, she said, to our golden boy and to his sister who will buy him the BMW he deserves. Laughter burst around the backyard like applause. My father nodded. My brother smirked. Even the neighbors smiled, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. I felt the sting before the glass hit the table. My pulse slowed, my smile froze. And for the first time, I saw them exactly as they were: beautiful, cruel, and certain I'd never fight back. They were wrong, because the next call they got wasn't from me, it was from my lawyer. From the street, our house looked like something out of a real estate commercial. White walls, trimmed hedges, a flag that caught the wind just right. Strangers would smile and say, "What a lovely family." They didn't see the silence underneath the paint. My father, Richard Hale, ran a construction company and believed people broke the same way buildings did when they stopped following the plan. He managed our lives like blueprints, every choice measured, every emotion trimmed. My mother, Victoria, was the decorator of that illusion. She spoke softly, smiled beautifully, and made cruelty sound like care. "I only want what's best for you," she'd say right before deciding it for me. My brother Aidan was the golden project they built everything around. From his first football trophy to his college acceptance letter, the house revolved around his victories. My father called him the Hale legacy. Called him the reason we worked so hard. They never said what I was, but I understood someone had to hold the spotlight steady while he stood in it. When my grandfather, Harold Rowan, passed away, he left me something that didn't fit their blueprint: a personal trust fund. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Released only when I turned 24 or earlier if I faced hardship. Grandpa had whispered once, "Freedom needs a backup plan." I didn't realize how right he was. I was 19 when I learned about it. My father called the idea unnecessary. My mother smiled thinly and said, "Families don't keep secrets." But after that day, they began to treat me like a safety deposit box that could talk. At 22, I was finishing my creative writing degree and working part-time at the public library. Every evening, I'd come home to find Aidan at the kitchen counter with friends, loud and careless. "Jen, grab us some chips," he'd shout, and I'd do it without thinking. Peace was easier than confrontation. My father admired his confidence even when it bordered on arrogance. My mother adored him openly. "He has your father's fire," she told me once. "And your patience, dear, the perfect mix." Then she laughed softly like it was a compliment. After Grandpa's death, my parents became obsessed with legacy. My father framed old photos of him shaking hands with local officials. My mother hosted charity brunches in his name. They never mentioned grief, only image. Then one night, as she was arranging flowers for yet another event, my mother said casually, "You know, Aidan's turning 20 soon. It would be so meaningful if you used your trust to buy him something special." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. She didn't. A few days later, I found a glossy car brochure on her desk. BMW 3 Series gift-ready packages. My name was scribbled on a post-it stuck to the cover. When I confronted her, she smiled as if I'd misunderstood. "It's just an idea," she said, "for family harmony." Harmony. That word hung in the air like perfume, sweet, suffocating. At dinner that night, my father mentioned the car again. "It's a symbol, Jen. Success should stay in the family." He set his fork down, the sound sharp against the plate. "You'll handle it, that's what responsible daughters do." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to. Control in our house never needed shouting, it just needed certainty. Still, I remember my grandfather's voice from years ago, low and certain. "If they ever make you choose between peace and dignity, choose dignity. Peace built on obedience isn't peace. It's a cage." I didn't know it yet, but the door of that cage was about to crack. The night of Aidan's 20th birthday felt staged, like a play they'd been rehearsing for months. The backyard was strung with gold lights, the table covered in white linen and champagne flutes. My mother floated from guest to guest, her pearls catching the glow. My father stood tall near the grill, shaking hands, looking every bit the proud patriarch. I stayed edge of the patio, holding a paper plate I didn't want. Everyone knew their roles: my mother the perfect host, my father the provider, my brother the star. I was the background noise until my name was called. "Jennifer," my mother said, tapping her glass, "a toast." She smiled, that stage smile that meant danger. "To our golden boy," she said, "and to his sister who'll buy him the BMW he deserves." For a second I thought I'd misheard her, but the laughter that followed told me I hadn't. The guests clapped, my father nodded, my brother smirked like it was already his. I could have laughed it off, played along like I always did, but something in me cracked, the kind of quiet break you don't hear until it's too late. "No," I said, just one word. The sound dropped out of the world, even the wind seemed to stop. My mother's smile froze midair, my father's face hardened. "Excuse me," he said, his tone razor sharp. "I'm not using my trust for him," I replied. My voice didn't shake, though my hands did. "It's mine." The silence that followed felt alive, thick and waiting. Then came the hand. It wasn't a slap so much as a shock, a flash of white across my cheek. The crowd gasped, the lights swayed. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the stone. My brother's smirk vanished. My mother hissed, "Smile, Jennifer, you're making a scene." I did smile, but it wasn't the one she wanted. Later, I'd wake up under fluorescent lights, the taste of blood and metal on my tongue. The nurse would whisper, "You're lucky it wasn't worse." She had no idea what worse was. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the ER was louder than any voice in my head. I stared at the white ceiling tiles until they blurred together. My face itched, my ribs felt tight, and my right hand trembled when I tried to lift the plastic cup of water on the tray. A nurse wrote notes without meeting my eyes. When she finally did, she said softly, "Fam." Hesitated, "They won't be coming." She nodded like she already knew. Officer Rivera showed up next, her badge glinting under the harsh light. She looked around the small cubicle at the bruises, the cracked phone on the table. "Do you feel safe going home?" she asked. The answer was no, but the words stayed in my throat. When she left, I turned my phone over. 12 missed calls from my mother, a text from Aidan. "You ruined everything." I deleted them one by one. That night when the nurse wheeled me to the discharge desk, I saw a familiar face waiting. Mrs. Kemp, the elderly librarian I worked with. She looked at me the same way she looked at damaged books, careful not to make me feel broken. "Oh, sweetheart," she said quietly, "you don't have to go back there, you know." I managed a smile or something like it. "Where else would I go?" She slipped a small card into my hand. "There's help, legal help, people who know what to do when families cross lines they shouldn't." Later in her car, she drove me to a budget motel near the highway. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me her extra charger, told me to rest, and promised to check in the morning. When she left, the silence felt heavy but clean. For the first time in years, no one was telling me what to do. I opened my laptop. I had copied everything months ago. Statements, payments, transfers from my grandfather's trust fund. I didn't even know why I'd done it back then. Just a quiet instinct that someday I'd need proof. I scrolled through the files, each line of numbers glowing cold and perfect. My parents had used my trust for vacations, home renovations, and donations that led straight back to my father's business accounts. There it was, evidence of theft wrapped in family loyalty. I remembered Grandpa's voice, raspy but firm. "Freedom needs a backup plan, Jenny. Keep yours safe." I opened a new email and typed a name I hadn't said aloud in years. Rowan and Associates, my grandfather's lawyer. It was past midnight, but I sent everything, the documents, the photos, even the hospital discharge papers. Under the subject line I wrote, "I think my grandfather expected this." I didn't expect an answer right away, but at 3:17 a.m. my phone lit up. "Rowan, you did the right thing. There's a clause for this hardship. We'll move fast, don't go home." For the first time since the slap, my chest loosened. At sunrise, I stood outside the motel. The air was cold, the sky just starting to tint blue. I watched people drive to work, coffee cups in hand, their lives moving forward. I'd been stuck in place so long I'd forgotten what forward felt like. When Rowan called that afternoon, his voice was calm, deliberate. "Jennifer, I'm activating the hardship clause. It transfers full control of the trust to you and freezes any access from your parents." I pressed the phone closer. "That's legal. It's what your grandfather wanted. He said he put it there in case you ever needed protection from them." Protection, the word hit harder than the slap. By evening, Rowan had arranged for a temporary restraining order. Officer Rivera called back, confirming the paperwork was in motion. "You've got a window of safety now," she said. "Use it." I spent that night in the motel bathroom washing the blood from my hair, watching it swirl down the drain. The mirror showed someone new. Tired, yes, but awake. When Mrs. Kemp brought me breakfast the next morning, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then squeezed my hand. "You're doing something most people never dare to do," she said. "You're drawing a line." That afternoon, I signed the final form. Rowan sent a request for emergency enforcement of trust control and physical protection. My signature looked steadier than I felt. They thought sending me to the ER would break me. They didn't realize it would be the place I learned how to rebuild. I turned off my phone, closed the motel blinds, and whispered into the quiet. This time they don't get to decide what happens next. The next afternoon, the Hale house looked exactly the same. Manicured lawn, white fence, a flag swaying gently in the breeze. You'd never guess that inside the picture-perfect family was scrambling to keep its story straight. From the living room window, Richard Hale's reflection stared back at him in the glass. "Damage control," he muttered. "We tell people she overreacted, emotional, unstable." Victoria stood near the fireplace, clutching a tissue she didn't need. "What if someone posts about the party the neighbors saw, then we deny it?" Richard cut in. "Our name is still good in this town." Aidan scrolled through his phone on the couch, jaw tight. "She made us look bad, Dad. She'll come crawling back, she always does." He was wrong, because just then the doorbell rang. Victoria adjusted her sweater, composing herself before opening the door. She froze. Standing there was Jennifer, face Calm hair pulled back a small folder in her hand. Beside her was a man in a dark grey suit. Rowan, Jennifer, her mother said softly, almost rehearsed. You should have called. I did, Jennifer replied. You hung up. Richard appeared behind her, voice low and cutting. You had the entire town talking. Do you even understand what you've done to us? Jennifer looked past him, scanning the living room, the perfect furniture, the photos, the life she was never allowed to touch. Then she set the folder on the marble coffee table. Rowan spoke first. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, I'm Harold Rowan's estate attorney. I represent your daughter regarding her trust. Richard's laugh was short and bitter. Her trust. We've been managing that for years. Not anymore, Rowan said calmly. He opened the folder and pulled out the stamped document. Under the hardship clause in Mr. Rowan's trust, full control and ownership have been transferred to Miss Jennifer Hale. Effective immediately. You no longer have access to or authority over any associated accounts. The words hung in the air like a sentence being passed. Victoria's hands shook. You can't just. Richard, say something. Richard's face flushed deep red. This is ridiculous. You're manipulating her. Rowan didn't flinch. All transactions made without her consent are being reviewed by the court. Misuse of trust assets constitutes financial abuse, a serious offense. Aidan stood abruptly. You're not suing your own parents, Jen. Jennifer turned to him, her voice steady. You used the card last month for your tuition. That wasn't yours either. He blinked. Dad said it was fine. I know, she said. That's the problem. Her mother tried a different tone, the soft, tearful one. Honey, please, we're family. Let's not destroy ourselves over money. Jennifer looked at her, something sharp but sad behind her eyes. It's never been about money. It's about choice. You've just never let me have. Rowan handed over another paper, a restraining order signed that morning. For your safety, Miss Hale will be living separately. You are not to contact her directly or through third parties. Victoria went pale. Richard stumbled back into the armchair, the sound of the paper hitting the table echoing in the silence. They turned white, Jennifer would later think, not from shock but from finally seeing themselves in the light they'd always tried to hide from. You did this to us, Richard said, voice trembling with a rage that suddenly sounded small. Jennifer exhaled slow and calm. No, you did this to yourself. She picked up her folder, nodded to Rowan and turned toward the door. As she stepped outside, the breeze caught the edge of her hair. The sun was sharp but warm, the kind of warmth that didn't burn. Inside, her parents' voices rose, anger, denial, fear, but they were fading. Rowan held the door open. You all right? He asked. Jennifer smiled faintly. For the first time, yeah, he nodded. You. No, your grandfather would have been proud. She looked back at the house one last time. The perfect facade gleamed in the sunlight, beautiful and hollow. They thought I'd never fight back, she said quietly, but I didn't need to scream. I just needed proof. And with that she walked down the front steps, not away from them but toward herself. The next few weeks felt unreal, like waking from a long, vivid nightmare and trying to adjust to daylight. My new apartment on Maple Street was small, bare walls. Second-hand furniture, but every sound inside it belonged to me. No footsteps packing behind closed doors, no voices reminding me to smile, just the quiet hum of freedom. Each morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains and painted the room gold. I'd make coffee, sit by the window and breathe in the smell of rain-soaked pavement. For the first time I didn't feel the need to rush anywhere. There were no roles left to play. The headlines came and went. Local business owner investigated for trust misuse. The article never mentioned names but everyone knew. Richard Hale took an indefinite leave from his company. Victoria withdrew from her social clubs. Aidan lost his scholarship after the incident went public. Rowan sent me the final notice a week later, confirmation that the trust was now solely under my name. The paper felt heavy in my hands, not because of money, but because of what it symbolized, my grandfather's faith finally fulfilled. I thought about calling Mrs. Kemp to tell her I was safe, but when I picked up the phone I hesitated. Some people save you just by showing you the exit. You don't have to drag them into what follows. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop. At the top I typed the cost of silence. The story wasn't just about them. It was about me and every person who had ever mistaken obedience for peace. That night, as I watched the city lights flicker beyond my window, I realized I didn't hate my family anymore. Hate was still a kind of tether, and I was finally free. For years I believed silence made me weak. Now it sounded like strength, the kind that doesn't need witnesses to be real. I closed my laptop, took one last sip of cold coffee and whispered to the empty room, this is what freedom feels like. They raised their glasses to my obedience. Now I raise mine to my freedom. I don't live in that house anymore, but sometimes when the wind shifts I still hear echoes of that night. The glass breaking the moment I finally said no. It doesn't hurt the way it used to. It just reminds me that every ending starts with one person deciding they've had enough. I thought taking back my trust fund was revenge. It wasn't, it was survival. It was proof that peace can be louder than pain if you stop apologizing for wanting it. If you've ever been told to keep quiet, remember your silence isn't their property. Speak, walk, rebuild, even if your voice shakes. And if this story sounds like yours, tell it. Someone out there needs to know it's possible. If you enjoyed the story, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for the next chapter.